Hello, my name is Sana, and I'm a Syrian activist. I'm joined here by Lily.
Um, I'm also a Syrian activist and a master's student in transitional justice.
And we're also joined by Dr. Azzam Al Kassir, who is a political scientist and a researcher based in London with a PhD in politics from Birkbeck University of London, where he focused his research on the case of Al-Nusra Front in Syria, and a master's degree with distinction in Middle East politics from the University of Exeter. This research spans modern political Islam, radical Islamism, and the complex geopolitics of the Middle East. And the aim of this video podcast is for Anglophone audiences and it will be posted on SOAS Syrian Society accounts after.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Sana. Thank you for inviting me and showing interest in my research. I'm really happy to join you today, and I hope things will be clear for people who are not familiar with the Syrian context. So we'll try to simplify things. I promise.
Thank you so much for coming and joining our first video podcast that we're doing. I wanted to also talk from student to student, that before we start, would you be able to tell us what inspired you to take on the subject of your PhD and what it means to you?
Yes, sure. So to start with, I've always wanted to study political Islam in general, the phenomenon of political Islam, how people would want to be active politically and at the same time be pushed by Islamic agenda or Islamic framework. And I developed this since I was doing my BA in Syria a long time ago, and then I started my master's degree in Syria to study the future of political Islam in the Arab world. I couldn't finish because of the situation. Then the uprising started in Syria, and then I left the country. Then in the UK, I did a master's degree, as you mentioned in the introduction, and I did my thesis was on Hezbollah and Hezbollah's intervention in Syria. So it's still within the realm of political Islam, because at the time when I did my master's degree in 2013 and 2014, everyone was talking about why would Hezbollah intervene in the Syrian conflict? What are the implications of this? How is it going to change or alter the conflict there? After I finished my master's degree, I wanted to do a PhD, still about political Islam, but then I wanted to shift a little bit and focus on something different, Salafi jihadism. So I was interested in Salafi jihadism because I started my PhD in late 2016, early 2017. And at the time, in Syria, Salafi jihadism was expanding. You had many representatives at the time, many organizations that belong or subscribe to the Salafi jihadist ideology. The main one at the time was ISIS, Daesh, as we used to call it. There are other variations, other groups that subscribe to Salafi jihadism, such as at the time was called Jabhat Al-Nusra. There was also some other Islamist organizations which varied in terms of their extremism, the use of violence, and other elements. So for my PhD, I chose to study Jabhat Al-Nusra, which at the time was undergoing significant changes. So the organization at the time changed its name, its discourse was changing as well. Organizational affiliation at the time as well was changing. All these factors pushed me to grow this interest in researching this particular group. If you're interested, we can talk in detail about this case that I studied in my PhD, and also later I wrote a few papers about Jabhat Al-Nusra, which later became Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the one we have today.
Yeah, surely we'll get more into it during this
Yeah.
podcast.
So, talking about his past, Jolani's past in particular,
Mhm.
Ahmed al-Shara has talked a lot about the various stages of combat that he has been through. So can you tell us a bit more about him and his past and the rebranding that we're seeing at the moment?
Yes, of course. Just to introduce who Ahmad Shara is, or Al-Jolani. Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, he is the founder of Jabhat Al-Nusra, which later became Jabhat Fath al-Sham in 2016, and then Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in 2017. So these all names, they indicate or they refer to one group that changed over time. And the founder and the main leader during all these changes, all these phases, was Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani. So Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, he was in Iraq. He is Syrian. Joined the fight in Iraq, joined the resistance in the aftermath of the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. And you know the the radical Islamist resistance that appeared in the aftermath of the invasion. So many people wanted to join the fight there and join the resistance or the insurgency. One of them was Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, who was young at the time. He was around 19 or 20 years old. He fought there, and he was imprisoned for a few years, and then he moved to Al-Mosul, where he became a local leader there among the Islamic group there. It used to be called the Islamic State in Iraq. This was immediately before the Arab Spring. When the Arab Spring reached Syria in 2011, he was sent to Syria to establish a new group, which was Jabhat Al-Nusra at the time. Jabhat Al-Nusra means Al-Nusra Front, to support the people of the Levant, or the people of the Asham. He came to Syria along with 9 people, I think, less than 10 people, jihadists who were in Iraq. They came to Syria and established a small group, which in early 2012 grew massively over time and became well known across Syria for their effectiveness as a militant group. From their discourse at the time, we knew that they are Salafi jihadists, so they used the typical terms used by Salafi jihadist groups, and the main name in Syria was Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani. So he led the group through all the changes that happened later. He didn't reveal his name, his face at the beginning until I think the first interview was in 2016, where he revealed his name and decided. He said they will change the name of the organization, and they will cut ties with Al-Qaeda, because earlier he pledged allegiance. He gave allegiance to Al-Zawahiri, who was the leader of Al-Qaeda Central. So in 2016, he rebranded his group and decided to join the Syrian uprising. Since then, Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani was known that he is Ahmad al-Shara. His name is Ahmad al-Shara. His real name is Ahmad al-Shara, and the nickname is Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani. Then in early 2017, he changed the name again, and he created a new coalition under the name of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And since then, he remained the main leader for this organization. Basically, he started as a typical Salafi jihadist leader, but then later he showed very interesting changes in terms of his discourse, the organizational affiliation, managing the situation on the ground. All these changes, they made his experience and his group's experience as well very interesting in terms of in the world of Islamic groups. So this is just an overview about Ahmad al-Shara, who now, like recently in the last couple of months, you know what happened in December, he led this massive military campaign, and he as a result, he became the de facto president. And now, after this conference that happened last week or 2 weeks ago, he declared himself as the president of Syria. So this is Ahmad al-Shara.
I think there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Ahmed al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Specifically this part where he had this long background in combat and then transformed into some kind of political leader. One might ask, did he have these traits in him the whole time, or did it come as a matter of necessity?
Very interesting. He recently, in one interview, he mentioned that he went through many changes because, like anyone else, your views would change over time, and your mentality, the mindset changes with your experience, and it all happens with aging. It's true. But I think from my research, I think it was clear from the very beginning that he presents a very unique case in the world of Salafi jihadism. I think he showed a really unprecedented flexibility when it comes to changing discourse. But the main thing is that he's interested in consolidating power. And he showed this trait all along the way, from the very beginning of establishing Jabhat Al-Nusra in Syria until the current phase. The main or the only commonality I could talk about is his interest in consolidating power all the time. So in order to achieve this and remain in control of his own group and the areas where his group controlled, he always changed discourse, changed the affiliation, and made new coalitions, unexpected coalitions with some other groups. Sometimes he fought other groups who belonged to the Free Syrian Army, for example, at the beginning, and then later factions that belonged to the so-called SNA, or the Syrian National Army, which was established in 2017 and 2018. So all these dynamics, they showed a very unique case, and the main or the clearest thing is his interest in power and remaining the central person in the organization and the coalitions that he led.
Thank you very much for your answers. Just in the context of Al-Jolani's past, you mentioned Jabhat Al-Nusra and HTS. And I think it's no secret that Al-Jolani or those groups have committed some mistakes in the past. And even Ahmed al-Shara admitted that in his interview with Leading, if you saw it. And these groups have been accused of violations, like we have Ra'ad al-Faris, who has been said to be assassinated by these groups. And also last year we saw some kind of crackdown on protests in Idlib against Al-Jolani himself. There were protesters saying, well, we got rid of Bashar al-Assad, or we're calling against Bashar al-Assad. We ended up with someone similar. I mean, these are not small claims. These are big claims. Can we really just erase this past? And or does Ahmed al-Shara believe he can erase his past? Or do you think that he will eventually address these violations in a clear way?
Very important and at the same time difficult question. I don't know if I can fully answer the question. There were some violations, of course, not just like simple mistakes. They were serious human rights violations along the way since the beginning of their activism in Syria. Some of the incidents were really serious violations, others were less important. But now people assume that because the group under the leadership of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani went through this moderation process, everyone expects that the group went from extremism to moderation. It's linear like that, but it's not like that. Sometimes they became even more radical than before. So in 2013, other factions, like factions of the Free Syrian Army at the time, which were the dominant militant player, they put pressure on Jabhat Al-Nusra to moderate. But what happened in reality is that the group under the leadership of Al-Jolani joined Al-Qaeda and became more extremist. And in order to understand this, we need to understand the context that led them to do this. At the time, ISIS was expanding into Syria, and they were becoming very powerful and threatening everyone, including Jabhat Al-Nusra. So for Jabhat Al-Nusra to protect itself and Al-Jolani to remain the main leader, he decided to give allegiance to Al-Qaeda, to get support from the central organization to face the danger coming from ISIS. And this pushed the group and Al-Jolani himself to become more radical. Their discourse in these years was really extremist and terrorist. You can tell it's terrorist. And it was the organization and the main leaders of the organization were classified as terrorists internationally. So people assume that it's just like a moderation process from A to Z, but it's not like that. There are many factors. These factors, they only show that the group was very pragmatic. Al-Jolani himself was very pragmatic. This in terms of their discourse. In practice, on the ground, as you mentioned, there were some serious violations. They used to be famous for carrying out these effective military operations, but they call them enghimasi, which is like something like military indulgence or something. They go and plant like a suicide bomber in one of these bases or checkpoints, and then they carry out a massive explosion. And in these explosions, many civilians died at the time. This happened in the early phase of the Syrian conflict. But later on, when they controlled areas like Idlib, which they, until very recently, they controlled, in 2017 and 2018, they were interested in applying Sharia law, and this led to some serious violations in Idlib and the surrounding areas. Gradually, they wanted to present a different model, so they started to establish like a state-like model of governance there. Since then, they became more aware about their actions and the way they deal with civil activists, like media correspondents and activists in general in the areas they control. So they became more aware about how to deal with them, because their discourse during this phase was to reintroduce the group to the international community as a moderate, as a Syrian faction. So they wanted to show that they are respecting human rights in the areas they control, and they sent a few messages to the international community to send delegates and send people to oversee the situation in Idlib and visit the prisons and detention centers. So that in action, I think in the last couple of years or 3 years, they became more aware about their actions. But in the past and earlier in the conflict, no, there were some serious violations. So now, if you ask me, is it possible to, or should we just like turn the page and to start a new chapter and forgive Al-Nusra and later Hayat Tahrir Sham for all these violations? This is very difficult. It depends on what Syrians, not only Hayat Tahrir Sham or the new administration, what they want, what Syrians in general decide in terms of the transitional justice trajectory that we will take. If we are to like send to try all the criminals who committed violations during the conflict, this necessarily should include Jabhat Al-Nusra and its leaders, including Ahmad al-Shara, if there are any cases against them. But now what's based on the discourse that they are using at the moment, they're saying we cannot punish everyone. there should be some kind of, we need to forgive minor things or not very important cases, and we have a de facto situation in Syria, so we need to move on and start a new chapter. So it depends actually. We can't tell if accountability will also reach Jabhat Al-Nusra and its leaders and later Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Thank you so much for this comprehensive answer. I think the topic of accountability is an important and big topic on its own.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think it's a very important factor, not only for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, for all other players in the Syrian conflict, including militias that were part of or like allying with the Syrian regime.
In terms of the present climate in Syria, well, it was well known that during the Assad regime, Assad had ingrained severe political repression in the minds of many Syrians. So do you believe in post-Assad Syria, does that fear still exist of openly criticizing taboo subjects and issues when it comes to the current transitional leadership? Or, in your opinion, has the regime's fall created a new wave of political criticism, for example?
Very interesting point. I think it has many layers. The issue has many layers. One of them is the direct political oppression that was with us for decades, not only during the last 14 years, so for almost like 54 years or even more. On one hand, we have this direct political oppression, and at the same time, we have the problem of lack of political openness and open dialogue among Syrians. So it's cultural, not only political. Because of this, because of oppression, people are not used to value criticism and value open dialogue and being open to other opinion. So this is a more serious problem. So even if the regime collapsed suddenly as it happened, still we have some problems. You mentioned fear. Fear is still there. People are not everyone was prepared for the like post-Assad era. Even for the closest like analysts, people who were following the situation very closely, no one imagined that the regime will collapse as quickly as it did. It was weak. For us, including myself, I think I knew that the Syrian regime is going to collapse one day, but it wasn't imaginable that this is going to happen in a matter of 11 days. So for local people who were in Syria, not everyone was prepared for this. So it was a shock for many people. So many people still cannot believe that the entire regime disappeared and now we have a new reality. This is on one hand. The second thing, it's related to the nature of the new regime, the new emerging regime. There is a state of chaos at the moment, a state of fear because not only the new administration is functioning, is the one in operation, there are other smaller militias and groups and gangs operating in the country. And this is creating a state of fear for people's safety and their bodily safety, I mean. At the same time, some people, they see Ahmad al-Shara as the new Bashar al-Assad. Some people, they fear that now we have a new de facto dictator. Even if the group is not claiming this, for some people, because they are not used to the new era or the new phase now with all these sudden changes that happened. So it's complicated. I think reassuring people is very important, and it's a burden. I think it's a responsibility that especially, particularly people who left the country earlier, the Syrian diaspora, they bear this responsibility to reassure people that a new reality is possible, a new political climate is possible. accountability for the newly emerging leadership is a shared responsibility.
Yes.
Inviting people, reassuring people that it's their right to do so. I'm mentioning the Syrian diaspora because when many people, millions of Syrians, they had to flee, and since then they are not directly affected or by the Syrian regime and direct oppression of the Syrian regime. So they became familiar with other ways of managing the country, managing our own affairs, as becoming active citizens ourselves. With this culture and this knowledge, I think we need to impart this knowledge into people who couldn't leave the country and remain under the control of the Syrian regime. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like within the Syrian activist groups here, a lot of us feel like we have to reassure people that you can speak your mind. It's okay to criticize some things when it comes to the government, and it's important that we create those spaces.
Yes, and after decades of oppression, I think many people, they don't know their rights, their responsibilities. They don't know if these are protected rights or not. That's why many people are afraid to speak their minds and share their concerns with others, even if they disagree with the newly rising administration in Damascus. Still, people, they fear to speak out.
Ahmed al has made a lot of promises, and has proven to be a very well-spoken person, and has somehow, after every interview, come out with these very eloquent points. But I think the main question is, behind all of these words that he's speaking, he's made a lot of promises. There's been a lot of talk about this national dialogue conference, and everyone is asking about this. And also, very, very importantly, there's been 14 years and more, much, much more, many decades of activism to locate the people that have been forcibly disappeared over the past years. The Syrian Network for Human Rights has estimated around 112,000 people, and the families have demands, and they demand that their rights be respected and acknowledged. The current transitional government has been accused of overlooking the seriousness of this demand. First of all, do you believe in the rush of all of the promises that Ahmed al is making would be able to provide on these promises? And do you also believe that he would be able to respond adequately to the demands of the families of the disappeared?
Yeah, I agree with you. He made really huge promises as soon as he became in power. If I were in his place, I wouldn't promise people that much. It's fine to be realistic, to just know that the situation is delicate and not everything is in the new administration's control. It's all dependent on many factors: the openness of the international community, the ability of the society to solve all these ills and these fractures that happened earlier in the conflict. So it's all dependent on many factors, actually. And the flow of external investments into the country, all these factors are just contingent. So I wish he didn't make all these promises, but I think meeting the promises will be very difficult in the short term. Maybe in the long run, if things changed in the future, he will be able to meet these promises. But in the short run, it's very difficult. The economy is collapsed. The society is still divided. There are many unresolved issues. One of them is, as you said, the issue of disappeared and the detainees, I mean, in Syria, and the families of the people who were disappeared during the course of the conflict. I don't understand why this issue hasn't become a top priority for the new administration. I don't know why. For like 6 or 7 weeks, everyone in Syria was calling the new administration to look after this issue and meet with people, with the families of the disappeared people in Syria. Eventually, it happened, and there was a meeting last week, I think. But still, there is a feeling that this issue is not being taken seriously. I don't know why. I really don't understand the reasons. Although I think it's an easy move to satisfy people and reassure people that we are still committed to restoring trust and deal with all the problems that we inherited from the time of the Assad regime. There is still an opportunity for the new administration to look after this issue. It's a serious one. And like during the conflict, as you mentioned, the number is like in the hundreds of thousands. So it's a serious matter, and there is no serious transitional trajectory without addressing this issue. So I hope in the future this will change.
Yes, I really hope that too.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a petition. I don't know if you saw it.
I
Also
haven't
to
seen it, but yeah, I would fully support such a move. It's a serious matter. People inside Syria trying to raise awareness about the importance of this, advocating everywhere, but we hope that this will be well received by the administration.
yes, hopefully, very importantly, also to mention the mass graves that are being found left and right in the country, which is atrocious.
So, within the realm of transitional strategies, how has the current transitional government dealt with the Syrian Democratic Forces until now? And do you believe that it has the political will or capacity to adequately include the Kurdish people in the following phases of political transition?
Yeah, this is a huge dilemma. We don't know actually what's going to happen with this big issue. The new administration is acting as if they control the entire country, but they don't. Like almost third of the country is out of their control. The eastern and northeastern part of the country, it's still under the control of the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, most of which are Kurdish parties and groups. There are problems. There is no trust between the new administration, the administration of Ahmad Shah, and SDF because of many problems that accumulated during the conflict. There were some tensions and many problems, especially that some factions which were part of this military campaign with Ahmad Shah, that Ahmad Shah led recently, they were supported fully by Turkey, and the hostility between Turkey and the SDF and the Kurdish groups in eastern and northeastern Syria. So still unresolved. There are tensions in areas in the north, in northern Syria, in the Aleppo countryside. There are local problems there. The new administration is saying they are going to they have established channels to negotiate with the SDF, but we don't know if this will lead to any tangible change actually in the future. One reservation is that the new administration started or they promised to have a Syrian dialogue, a round of Syrian dialogue, which will lead to probably a new constitution or a new committee for the economy and for other committees as well. So they started this without solving the problem with establishing channels and including the Kurdish factions and the SDF as one party. So it's still unresolved. It's not only with the SDF, also there are problems with some militias that control Sweda in the south and some groups that control Daraa in the south as well. So it's not only the problem with the SDF, but the most difficult problem is this one, because understandably the Kurdish factions are asked to surrender and to give their weapons and their arms and to trust the new administration or the newly formed army under the leadership of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, Ahmad Shara. So asking them to do so without building trust, it's a big ask actually. So personally, I advocate for negotiations and sending goodwill messages to the SDF as well. Yeah. And of course, the SDF, they are asked to do so as well, to show openness for dialogue and to sit on one table with the new administration. In the long term, we need to restore unity. The country should be ruled by one central government, but still the level of decentralization can be negotiated later, but no one should accept that there should be different militias or different groups controlling different parts of the country. But this should be done through negotiations.
Yeah, currently I think a lot of trust has to be gained from the new government, from all sorts of factions and groups. I think it's unfair to ask people to just succumb to the new government and accept it as it is. I think with the promises that's been given to us, there needs to be some actionable steps as well, because I think so far there hasn't been any tangible solutions. And like you said, it's all connected.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not only a Syrian matter, it's also it's interconnected with the geopolitics in the region and the international politics as well. You know, the involvement of the US, other regional players such as Turkey. So it's complicated. It's not just a Syrian matter. It's not an issue of sitting on one table for one time and that's it. It's connected with other issues as
well. And I think also that for the past, for quite a few years now, people have been talking. It hasn't been uncommon to hear, no, there's no Syria, it's Syrias now, you know, in plural. And I think that as a concept is also something that needs to be rebuilt, Syria as a whole, and not as Syrias that have been divided by geopolitics.
We cannot suddenly just forget that for 6-7 years or even more, the country was divided into 3 de facto or 4 de facto areas of control.
Yes.
With each one of them having their own model of governance, economy, everything. So they were totally different. So it's not easy to expect that, okay, in one day things will change and the country will be reunited again under one central government. This will take time, but it needs serious efforts to build trust among all these parties. Yes, there are like many accumulated mistrusts throughout the conflict.
Yeah, 100%. This rising to power did not happen in a political vacuum.
Yeah.
And speaking of political vacuum, and moving away a bit from Shara's strategies, I wanted to ask you about his entourage, because you, I don't know if you have come across or studied more in depth the people that he has surrounded himself with.
Yeah.
But I thought it could be interesting to talk about the political, ideological paths of his entourage. For example, the foreign minister Asad al-Shibani has had a pretty prominent role. I mean, he's traveled for the Paris conference, and he has also had media attention. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how they complement each other as political.
Yeah, we can talk a lot about these things, but we'll start from the last point, which is Asad Shibani. I think now all eyes are on him because he's representing the new face of the administration. So the more moderate and accepted or acceptable face of the new administration. He is one among a few people who were trusted by Ahmad Shah. They were very close to Ahmad Shah. From the very beginning, Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani surrounded himself with people he can trust. Shibani is one of them. Other people like Abu Mari al-Qahtani, this one who was assassinated last year, was among the close group around Al-Jolani. Also, there is Mazhar al-Wais, who is a religious figure. Another one is Abdul Rahim Atun, who also a religious figure. These people are still very close to Ahmad Shah. So he surrounded himself by a group of trusted people, and they still accompanied him throughout the conflict. In terms of the content of their discourse and ideology, they all came from one source, which is or one place, which is the insurgency in Iraq. All of them were there, fighting them. So the background is Salafi jihadist, very conservative. Like you describe a group or someone as a Salafi jihadist when they understand jihad or militant jihad as the only method for activism, for political activism. So you achieve power through jihad, through this militant struggle. So they come from this background, but later on they exhibited some not very familiar elements. So in 2016 and 2017, the unprecedented move was to accept Syria as a framework for activism, as the new entity. For Salafi jihadists, they don't believe in national these modern political creations, nation states and other formations. They believe in the concept of the Ummah and the concept of Khilafah, which is the caliphate, the Islamic caliphate, which doesn't like exactly follow modern rules in terms of like political rules in the modern world. So they reject completely the modern state. But for this group, in 2017, they said, okay, now we are a Syrian group. We're not interested in pursuing any international agenda. We are one among many factions that belong to the Syrian uprising, and the aim is to liberate Syria, to fight the Syrian regime, and to establish a new government. At the beginning, they said they needed a new Islamic government or Islamic form of governance, but the framework for their activism is Syria, modern Syria. So they accepted the boundaries or the borders of the modern state of Syria, which was unprecedented for a Salafi jihadist group. Later on, they showed an interest in developing or creating their own model of governance. So they, for the first time, for a Salafi jihadist group, they separated the militant and the religious affairs from the government, the newly established government in Idlib, where they controlled. So they had these two different bodies or functions within their group. Also, they sent messages to the minorities that lived in areas under their control. There were some Druze towns in Idlib and some Christian communities in Idlib as well. So they allowed them to live their life normally, to do their religious activities as well. So in this way, they were different. So they completely changed from the typical Salafi jihadist discourse that usually colors this kind of organizations. Nowadays, after they become a de facto power, or the de facto administration in Damascus, the ideology is unclear. It's a mishmash of different things. You can find many elements. I think, based on my research and observations, I think they are still unsure about their own ideology. It's in the making now. So they are,
Okay.
still it's changing. The thing that we are certain about is that they are flexible and they are changing. Of course, there are limits to this moderation process. We don't know where they will stop, and if they change course in the future, we still unsure. But they are flexible, and at the moment they are negotiating with everyone. But when I say they are moderating or they are flexible, we need to understand that the pressure is not only coming from the side of the liberals. The pressure is coming also from the very conservatives as well, from the radicals as well. So they have to balance all these demands from every direction. So it's not only one directional. It's not coming from the West or coming from the Syrian liberal groups. They also have their internal dynamics, or internal power dynamics. They have to satisfy some very conservative factions within their groups. So we need to understand these, the complicated nature of this situation.
Yeah. That was very comprehensive.
The message is that it's really complicated. You cannot predict that this process of moderation will lead them to this point. It's still
Yeah.
unclear even for them.
I also wanted to ask, because you said a lot, they cannot, but I wanted to ask, are they a homogeneous ideology? Do they work together? Or do you think that maybe, for example, the foreign minister might, as you said, like be the more moderate?
Well, we need to understand that people, I mean, the main leaders of the group now, they are homogeneous in terms of their outlook, but they don't represent everyone within the group. So the top level, they are on one page, because what we have at the moment is a result of like more than 10 years of internal conflicts and a struggle internally happening. But these changes, they don't always reach lower levels of this hierarchy of the organization. So for the fighters and members of Hayat Tahrir Sham, for example, not all of them are convinced by this moderate phase of their group. Some of them, they really still subscribe to Salafi jihadism, but they have to obey the commands of the new leader. If this is sustainable, I'm not sure about this. This needs serious work in the future to convince these members and the fighters that things change now. They are leading a state which is different from leading like a small group controlling a small area in Syria. Now they are leading the government. They are forming a new army, a national army, which is different. So I hope in the future there will be these changes in terms of the adopting a moderate discourse will reach lay members of the group. But for Al-Jolani himself, for Ahmed al-Shara, and the main people around him, I think they share like many of their most of their background in terms of their ideological outlook. Yeah, but things may change in the future. We don't know, because it's not only an ideological thing; it's also real world politics and interest and power and competition. He's trying to satisfy everyone, and we don't know if this is sustainable.
We will see.
Yes,
Um,
I'm
but
watching.
speaking of change, and moving a bit towards the future of Syria. In the past, we saw a lot of different groups throughout the revolution, and it might have looked like they were going to be the future leader, the I guess alternative to Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah.
Um, for example, we saw Burhan Ghalioun and we saw Badr Jamus in the latest years as well. But there has been a lot of disillusionment surrounding these characters who presented themselves as opposition, and nothing came of it. And instead, we had a lot of a protracted pain. So, do you believe that these previously influential people have a role in Syria's future? Do you believe that they should have, or do you think that this chapter is closed?
Yeah. I think yes, they should play a role in the future. Of course, we need a representative government. I prefer this model of governance, representative government, including members of the Syrian opposition, the political Syrian opposition, and also representing military factions and groups that are part of the Syrian civil society as well. So we need an inclusive government. Realistically, what's happening is that these figures, the ones you mentioned, who were leading figures in the Syrian opposition, they were ineffective. For Syrian people, they view them as part of the problem. For more than a decade, they were ineffective. They were just like followers of the will of international and regional players, and they didn't have their own agenda. They were not independent or fully Syrian. That's how people view them, and this is very, very negative. And this gave the new administration an excuse to exclude these groups. So they say now, you don't represent people. For many years, you were receiving funding from regional and international organizations, but there was no accountability, and we don't know where you spent this money. This is on one hand. On the other hand, the other problem is that during the course of the Syrian conflict, you had two trajectories, the political one and the military one, and they were isolated. So for the political opposition, they were not in direct contact with fighters on the ground, so they couldn't affect the situation on the ground. So when these factions they defeated Assad eventually, they could claim that they are the ones who toppled Assad. So it's not the political opposition. So why would us include you or incorporate all these bodies into the new government if they did not help us in like overthrowing Assad and achieving the victory that they achieved eventually. So these enabled the new administration to kind of sideline this mainstream or the well-known figures of the opposition. Now, if you ask me, should they play a role? Of course, they should play a role, although they were not very effective in the past, but still they represent some people in Syria. We cannot have only like a government with one color or one ideology. We need to include them. Now we are starting a new process of national dialogue. Everyone should be included in, including these the figures you mentioned. So yeah, I think it's because
Yeah.
mainly because of the ineffectiveness that they showed during the earlier in the conflict.
Yeah.
I don't know if they could do anything differently, but still, in the eyes of many Syrians, they were not the ones who achieved victory. But now, if you ask me about my assessment, my analysis of the situation, I think Hayat Tahrir Sham and the new military militant coalition that overthrew Assad eventually, they only did the last task. But before them, all Syrians contributed to the eventual victory of the
Yes.
opposition or the uprising, because not everyone was able to raise arms. Many people, all the detainees, the people who were tortured by the Syrian regime, also contributed to exposing the nature of the regime. People who
Yes.
left the country, who fled the country, also they were working from afar to put pressure on the regime. So everyone played a part, including, of course, the military or the militant groups as well. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. There have been so many initiatives to document what's happening, and we have to give right and we have to give acknowledgement to all of those organizations and people who have put their lives on the line to document what happened.
It's very naive and short-sighted to assume that it only happened in November and December 2024.
Yeah,
Not at all. It's all like the Syrian regime was weakened because of the collective work of Syrians,
yeah.
regardless of their contribution, if it's military or it's political or like civil activism, or just merely resisting and staying alive in this dire situation inside Syria.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a collective effort, I think, and that's why everyone was celebrating. It's not only Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So it's a Syrian achievement.
So, could you tell us what you see as some challenges for the current transitional government going forward?
Well, where to start? There are many challenges actually. One of them is convincing the international community that the current government is able to contain the situation and control the country and establish a new representative government. This is one thing. The second challenge is containing the situation militarily. I mean, the security scene inside Syria as well. This is another challenge. There are still some sporadic but still very serious incidents across the country. Many gangs, many criminals are still operating in the country, like using the chaotic situation. This is another problem. Another serious issue is rehabilitating and rebuilding the Syrian economy. Now it's totally collapsed, and we are at the verge of a famine across the country. This needs serious effort to address as well, which is interconnected with many other factors, including acceptance from international players, including the EU and the United States as well. So I think these are the main challenges. One of these issues, I think, one of the ways to address these things is for the new administration to show seriousness in dealing with this situation. I mean, meeting their promises. So when they promise to have a representative government and lead a new process of national dialogue, to take it seriously and seriously involve everyone. As we mentioned before, leaders of the Syrian opposition, leaders of communities across the country, representing all areas of the country, including the Kurds and other groups as well. So far, my assessment is that the situation is good, but we need tangible steps. All the promises, these big promises, are needed, but we need to see some tangible steps. It's not early. For the first couple of weeks and the first month, everyone was saying it's still early. Just give them a chance. They are promising big promises, so let's give them time. But now it's not early to start seeing some tangible changes and tangible steps. But to respond to your question, the challenges are many, but we need to start addressing them.
And building up on that, how can we as Syrian diaspora, and you as a student, as a previous student in the UK, how do you view the role of the wider Syrian diaspora in participating in the accountability process of all parties?
Well, the Syrian diaspora in general has a significant role to play. If you ask me specifically about the role of Syrian students and people who graduated from leading universities, including in the UK, for example, of course they have a significant role to play. They need to activate the organizations and the groups that they established during the past 10 or even 14 years. They need to activate these organizations in order to make use of the knowledge that they accumulated in the past as well. So Syrian students, they studied all the disciplines, including politics, economics. They studied also the hard sciences as well. So Syria now needs everything, including these expertise and these skills. So everything is needed. What can be done at the moment is relinking these two areas, the diaspora and people inside the country. So Syria now, they need everything. We don't have to physically move into Syria, go back to Syria. We can now, many of these skills can be transferred online. You can provide training. You can send money for people who can do so. Connecting with students in Syria, with the universities now. The new Ministry of Education, for example, is showing willingness to collaborate. We need to make use of this, establish new channels to provide support in education and other areas as well. I think we need to reorganize and use the networks that we established. Myself, I'm one of the co-founders of the Syrian Academics and Researchers Network in the UK. When we established this network now 3 years ago, when we established it, no one was thinking that we will be able to directly help or assist the situation inside Syria and collaborate with Syrian universities. It wasn't foreseeable that the Syrian regime will collapse suddenly, and then a new reality will emerge in the aftermath. So we started as a network to provide a platform for ourselves and others to work on projects on Syria and familiarize ourselves with what's being researched or what's being written and done about Syria. This is one of the initiatives that can be activated now. We are thinking of ways to help the situation there, what kind of mentorship, lectures, training programs we can probably do in the future. This is one example, and I'm sure there are many other examples. In Germany, there are some academic groups. Also, they are thinking of ways to do things inside Syria, training workshops and delivering some lectures in Syria. So there are many things that can be done, and for academics specifically, I think helping in every aspect is needed and is possible, including, for example, creating a new curricula across disciplines in every discipline.
I think as Syrian diaspora, it's really important that we start this conversation and collectively try to build something for Syria.
100%, I fully agree with you. The first step is to establish these channels, to talk to each other and see what can be done, and also bringing our ideas closer to the ground, just So I've talked to many Syrians in the diaspora at the moment. There are big ideas, but we need to see what practically can be done, and this needs people on the ground who understand the situation on the ground fully, and they can see what's applicable and what's not. Yeah. You know, after 10 or 14 years of being abroad, sometimes you don't fully understand the context. You miss many things, like the lack of basic needs, for example. It's unimaginable. Now you don't have electricity, for example. Uh, Water as well. There's shortage in terms of water and all the basic needs. So you need this kind of knowledge which is closer to the ground.
Yes. And also that applies to people whose parents migrated and then they lived outside their whole lives, like me, for example.
Of course, yeah. Probably you can tell us what should be done in this case, for example. I'm sure many things can be done, but it's a shared responsibility, and now all of us, we need to think of practical steps, what to do. One of the things, back to the point I mentioned at the beginning, that there's a problem with the way we think and our mindset. We used to depend on the state, the concept, the concept of the nanny state, that the state is everything. You expect the state to hire you, to give you the salary, you don't do anything. This created a lack of initiative. And now we have a different reality, and the new administration is moving into a free market economy, and this is leaving many people vulnerable. So we need to make people more prepared to manage their own affairs and start creating the new opportunities and new projects apart from the state. It's not expected now that the state will offer any kind of social services or help people to. It's the opposite now. They are forcing people to leave their jobs because they can't afford to pay everyone. This is creating a huge problem. I think for us in the diaspora, if we can do anything, we should try to motivate people to become creative and think of different ways to manage their own affairs, their own finances, away from the state. Yeah. And for every Syrian, if you can support people financially, that would be a great help at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I mean, essentially, we all have a role to play to rebuild the country one by one, bit by bit.
And there's great initiatives on the ground, like Mudham Team,
Yeah.
Abjad Initiative.
With a lot of experience.
Absolutely. We don't have to create everything from scratch. Now we can build on what's being done. These are just a few of the organizations that we have. There are many initiatives. Some of them were already existent. Others are just emerging at the moment. We can support them instead of just starting new initiatives, I think. I'm not against starting new organizations or projects, but if we can support the things that already functioning, that would be great as well.
Yes, I agree. So, do you have one last sentence of inspiration that you would like to impart on us
Well,
before we conclude?
yeah, to end on a positive note, I'm optimistic. I know that in the short term things will remain very difficult for everyone, but in the mid to long term things will be much better. I know that I've noticed myself that all Syrians are motivated at the moment. They are willing to provide help. Probably we can't do it immediately, and we can't, all of us, just go back to Syria and start working on the ground. But gradually we will be able to have a greater impact on the ground, and will impart the knowledge we accumulated in the diaspora. So my message is just to remain optimistic. I understand now the economic situation is very bad, but it will not remain like this forever. But it's all dependent on our initiative and creativity as well.
Thank you very much. That was really beautifully put.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Sana, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much for helping us provide a space, Anglophone audience on what's currently happening in Syria. I think this was a very in-depth and fascinating conversation about the transitional government, and every insight is valuable. So this concludes our first video, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.